Yeah, you gotta cite sources to give people credit, but there's so much more that you can do with them. I think my own worst enemy is the only person I'd wish the burden of grading papers on, but if there were a way to get the benefits of grading without the drudgery of it, I might even wish it on my best friends. By that, I mean that my experience grading papers has taught me a lot about writing and given me a new perspective on the things that I was taught in school. And one of those things that I've come to understand on a whole nother level is the value of citing sources. I feel like the most common message I heard when I was learning how to write in school was that you needed to cite sources in order to give people credit for their ideas. If you don't cite sources, you're stealing, and stealing is bad. And based on the papers that I've graded, I think a lot of people have gotten the same message. Unfortunately, only citing sources to give other people credit for their ideas is maybe one of the least useful reasons to include sources in your writing. And as I've spent time over the years grading papers, I've noticed that people don't usually take full advantage of the sources that they have. So today we're talking about 3 ways that you can use your sources more meaningfully. Beyond just giving people credit for their ideas, you can actually use your sources to make your arguments more persuasive and your writing more effective. When researchers write and publish, it's sort of like a complicated way of writing letters to each other. Researchers in the same field of study are all working on similar problems, and they write in order to share their findings with each other and work together on advancing human knowledge. That's why if you spent much time reading academic articles, they always start with a literature review or a huge pile of citations. Yes, literature reviews do give credit to other scholars, but that's not really their primary purpose. The sources that get cited in a literature review primarily serve to help the author establish their niche. That is, they help to show that the author knows what other people have said about the topic before, and that they're going to make a unique contribution to the ongoing work of discovery. So by citing sources in this way, the author does a lot to boost their credibility and to encourage readers to keep reading. I mean, think about it. If you can see that the writer knows their stuff and that they're going to say something about the topic that nobody else has said before, you'll be a lot more likely to keep reading. So instead of looking for sources that just show your readers information that you had to look up, try to include sources that show your readers that you know your topic inside and out. Make sure that your research sets you up to know and understand everything that other people have said about the topic before, and then show those sources to your readers to give them enough context to understand the unique argument that you're going to make. It's a classic pattern in academic writing. Review the literature, point out what other sources have missed, and then go on to fill that gap yourself. But it's not just a tradition. In fact, it serves the rhetorical purpose of showing readers that you're going to give them something that they can't get anywhere else, and it reassures them that you've done enough of your homework to give them something that's high quality. The most common citation-related disappointment that I experience when I'm grading papers comes from seeing writers put citations in the wrong places, or rather, they don't put citations where they need them the most. Now, this example might be a little overly dramatic to make a point, but it's really not that far off. It's important to find a way to get more ice cream to more people. In fact, less than 99% of the world's population is eating ice cream at any given time, winter. I argue that the best way to get more ice cream to more people is by installing ice cream dispensers next to water fountains in all public and government buildings. That will be the most cost-effective and far-reaching solution to this unfortunate situation. Now, while this isn't a serious academic paragraph, it's doing something that I see in research papers all the time. Can you see why the citation is in the wrong place? Well, here, the citation is only working to give credit for a fun fact, a statistic that the author had to look up. But the point of this paragraph is not to establish the percentage of the world's population that is eating ice cream at a given moment. The point of this paragraph is to introduce the author's proposed solution to a problem. Unfortunately, there are no sources backing up the author's actual proposal, so readers could immediately say, "How do you know that would work? Why do you think this is the best solution? Why should I believe you?" And because there aren't any sources to substantiate the author's claims, those questions will go unanswered. The purpose of citing sources is not just to give your audience fun facts, but that is probably the most common way that I see sources being mishandled. Yes, if you include a fact that you didn't know before, you do need to provide a citation for it, but when you're writing an argument and trying to persuade an audience, it's way more important to use your sources to support and back up your claims. So if we go back to the paragraph, the only citation here is just giving credit for a fun fact. But a citation is really needed here, ideally with an explanation of how that source supports the claim being made. This is the thing that readers might pick a fight with, so this is the thing that needs supporting sources the most. When you're writing then, be on the lookout for things you say that an antagonistic reader could challenge. These are the places where you really need to include sources to back up your claims. Often, I see sources being attached to facts and statistics that don't really have much to do with the main point of the paragraph. And of course, that's not to say that you shouldn't include citations there. Just don't forget to include sources where you really need them to support the things that you're trying to say. Sometimes I think of these as load-bearing citations. In the same way that a load-bearing wall keeps a building from falling down, a load-bearing citation keeps your argument from falling apart. Now, it's possible to think that you wouldn't need to cite sources when you introduce your own main points because you didn't look those up. You came up with them on your own. But if you want your readers to take your claims seriously, you have to show them that even if they are your own original ideas, you didn't just pull them out of thin air. So cite sources that talk about similar situations and related studies that can reinforce the points that you're trying to make and thereby keep your argument from falling apart. In addition to setting up your niche and supporting your central claims, there's a third purpose for citing sources that's sort of a hybrid of the two, and it's to demonstrate consensus. There's rhetorical strength in numbers, and citing sources is one valuable way of showing your readers that you're not sailing through the sea of mayonnaise and spouting off wild things that have nothing to do with anything. If, in other words, your readers can see that your ideas are grounded in and supported by the ideas of other people, they'll be much more likely to trust what you have to say. So don't just cite sources to give credit for things that you had to look up online. Cite sources that show your readers that other people have thought about the problem that you are working on and come to similar conclusions, because frankly, it's just a little easier to trust somebody whose ideas align with the ideas of other reliable experts. Of course, you don't just want to replicate other people's arguments. That would make your paper pointless. But being able to say that you're improving on what other people have proposed and that your ideas are very reasonable and generally agreed upon is a really effective persuasive move, and citing sources can help you to do that. The first and most basic reason to cite sources is to give people credit for their ideas. But that also might be the shallowest reason to cite sources. So, in addition to giving credit where it's due, I hope you'll take advantage of these other more rhetorically meaningful purposes for citing your sources. So cite them to build your authority and set your argument apart. Cite them to support your claims and reinforce your argument. And cite them to show that other people agree with you too. There's so much more to research than just looking up statistics, and there's so much more to citing sources than just showing readers where you got your information. Incorporating sources effectively can actually make all the difference between an argument that crumbles and one that changes the world. So go do more with your sources and then come back next week to tell me how it went. I'm already looking forward to it.